Okay, so now that we have our pattern for our tote bag cut out, and like I said, I cut out the large, but that's up to you which size you want to cut out. We're going to go over some of the directions. Okay, so we're going to be sewing with a 5/8 inch seam allowance. And so where that's at on your machine, your needle should be over here to the left. Go up here. And you'll be pressing this right here, and that will make your needle go over to the left. And then I just drew, and some of your machines will have this. This is just an easier way to determine where it's at. So from that left part of your needle to this first line, that's 5/8 of an inch. Okay, so that's the seam allowance that we are going to be sewing in this pattern. Okay, so we're going to go to step 1. It says transfer dots for corner seams and handle placement marks to wrong side of each bag piece using a water soluble marking pen. So what you can do, most of these fabrics, the colors that I've given you are fairly dark, so you can use this white pencil from your sewing kit. So I'm going to mark where these dots are at on the wrong side of the fabric, and I'm going to mark the placement handles, these two just little tick marks, lines. So I'm going to come over here to my pattern. I'm going to take out my pins. So the first one I'm going to mark on the wrong side, so remember we cut these out right sides together, is this dot right here. And then I'm going to transfer it over to the other side. And I'm going to do it on the other side, on the left side. So I transferred it on both sides. And then I'm going to come up here to the top. And actually for this part, those little tick marks, I'm just going to clip just a tiny bit in. Okay. So that way I know exactly where that handle will be placed. Just maybe 1/8 of an inch. Okay, now that we have transferred our dots and we've marked on the wrong side of the fabric, both pieces of fabric, and we have done our little clips, this is going to be where the handle will be placed. We're actually going to skip this step because we don't need to do it for the fabric that we're sewing. We have a felt fabric and it doesn't fray. But if you're using a different type of fabric in this pattern, you would overcast the raw edges of the sides and bottom of each bag piece. But for our remote learning, we don't have sergers that we're using to overcast that. So when we get back in the classroom, I will show you what a serger looks like. Okay, so the next part of step 2 is we're going to pin the bag pieces right sides together at the bottom edge, so right here, and the sides, so each side. So we're going to pin it together, stitch bottom and side seams, press seam allowances open. So we're just going to take off our pattern, and we already have our right sides together, and we're just going to pin the sides just every few inches. Make sure you have that where it starts here, the raw edges together, and where it ends. Okay, I'm going to turn it, and I'm going to pin the bottom edges together, right sides together. And we're lining up our cut or our raw edges. And then I am going to pin the other side together. And then I am going to bring my machine. And remember, I'm going to sew a 5/8 of an inch of a seam and take out my pins wherever I'm at. Remember, right here, you want to have that displayed. So what that will do, it will back stitch automatically when you start. And then I'll show you what to do at the end, okay? Okay, so remember when we start our stitch, we put our presser foot down. So the raw edge is right along that first line, okay? And it will automatically back stitch it for you. So let's just go slow. And each time you come to a pin, you should be stopping, taking the pin out, putting it into your pin cushion. The slower you go, the more control you're going to have. Okay, keep adjusting it to make sure that your raw edges are together. And when I come to the end, I'm going to back stitch. By pushing this downward arrow, that back stitches it a couple of stitches. And then when you're finished, bring your needle up and clip. And by doing that, by bringing your needle up and clipping, it will automatically adjust it back to back stitching at the very beginning. Okay, and then I'm going to do the next side, where this is the bottom. So it back stitches automatically for me. Remember your sewing safety, your hands are to each side of the needle, not in front of the needle. And my raw edge is right on that first line. That's 5/8 of an inch. Okay, I'm going to back stitch, pushing the back stitch button. And then needle up and clip. And then press your foot up. And now I'm going to go to the last side. So it will automatically back stitch for me. And the more experience you get with the machine, the faster you can go. So each time you come to the pin, stop with your presser foot. And when I come to the end, pressing the back stitch button, let it stitch maybe 2 or 3, and then let it go, and then needle up and clip. And then press your foot up. Okay, now that we have our bottom and our side seams sewn, we are going to press open the seams. So you can, if you don't have an iron, you can still do this with your fingers. It'll probably be fine. But I'm bringing it over here to my iron. Remember your iron safety when you're not using it, to keep it on its base, and make sure that your hands are away from the heat because it's very hot. I have burned myself many times and have scars on my arms from burning myself, and I don't want you to do that. So I'm just going to kind of finger press it at first with my fingers, and then I'm going to go very slowly. So pressing is just pressing down and holding it for a few seconds, and then moving along your seam. Our whole goal in sewing is to make sure that our seams are flat. So that's the first side. I'm going to bring it over to the second side. And again, I'm just going over it with my fingers first just to open it up a little bit. And this felt fabric, it's nice because it doesn't fray, so you don't really need to do anything to the seams to make sure that it doesn't fray, and it presses really nicely. So we have a nice flat seam. So the bottom part is a little trickier, so you're going to have to do it a little bit at a time. I'm just flattening everything out first and just taking it a little bit at a time because it doesn't lay quite flat because you have the two side seams. Okay. And I'm just bringing it to the edge of my ironing board and pressing down for a few seconds and then moving along to the end. Okay, so now we're going to move it over to the machine, and we are going to match up these two seams. Okay, make sure they're touching each other, and we're going to pin on each side of the seam. So we're pinning the seam allowance down, and then we're pinning the seam. And we have our marks that we made at the beginning, and we're going to start here and we're going to stop here. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to pin both sides, making sure that I am matching my seam. Okay, and then I'm going to take it over to my machine. And I'm going to start right on that mark that we made. So this is a 5/8" seam. And see how it automatically backstitched it? Okay, you need to make sure that your seam allowance is flat there. So each time I stop, I take out a pin. Okay, and then I'm going to backstitch. Oh, and then lift my needle up, clip, and then that automatically sets it back to backstitch. Okay, and then I'm going to do the other side. Making sure my seam allowance is flat under there. Stopping each time I take a pin out. And and then back stitching when I get to the end, 2 or 3 stitches, and then lifting my needle up and clipping. Okay, so that step we just stitched was step 3, fold each bottom corner right sides together, matching side seam to bottom seam, and stitch corner seam from dot to dot. Okay, so this is a close-up of what we just did. Okay, then you will just turn the bag, so turn it inside out. You want to push those seams just with your fingers is good, so you kind of have a point there. Ooh, and it's starting to look like a tote bag, you guys. Okay, so now we're going to just set that aside, and we're going to step 4. So fold handle on fold line, wrong sides together, and press to crease. Unfold, place raw edges along crease line, and press, fold again, and stitch close to both edges. So we're going to fold it in half first, and then we are going to fold to that fold line. So let me show you what that looks like. So this is the handle. It's number 3. So all I need to do is take out my pins, and I'm taking it over to the iron again. So when you finish with all of the pattern pieces, make sure you put them back into your pattern envelope. Okay, so these are right sides together. Okay, so we are going to press this wrong sides together to start with, just right in half. Because we want the right side to be showing. Okay, so I'm just pressing it in half, matching those cut edges. And same thing for the other piece. Okay, and I'm going to set that one aside, and then I'm going to open it up, and then I'm going to match this raw edge to that pressed line, and I'm going to press it again. And be really careful with this. The iron's very hot and the steam can get to your fingers, so keep your fingers away from the iron. Then I'm going to do it to the other side. And then I'm going to fold it again where I folded it to begin with. Okay. And then I'm going to do the same thing to the other piece. So I already have it folded, pressed in half. So that raw edge is coming to my first line that I pressed, where I pressed it in half. Okay, so now I'm going to bring it over. It says, after I've pressed it, fold again and stitch close to both edges. Okay, so this is what it's going to look like. So let me show you what that looks like. Okay, so the first edge I'm going to stitch closed is the one that's open, and then I'm going to stitch the folded edge too. So you're probably best to have your stitch length at 0.0 millimeters to 5, just because it's really going to be really thick right now. Okay, so it's going to back stitch, and for this you don't really need to pin it. So I'm just, my needle is right on that folded edge. So notice how I'm holding it from the back to try to just keep it as straight as I possibly can. Okay, and then when I come to the end, I'm going to back stitch. And lift my needle up and clip it, and lift my presser foot up. So now I have that closed, stitched closed. So now I'm going to go back over and do the same thing to that folded edge. Okay, and when it comes through, just kind of guide it through with your other hand in the back. We're just stitching on each edge. And then a back stitching. And then lifting my needle up and clipping it. And now I have my handle ready to stitch on. Okay, so we're going to do that for the other side. And then we will have completed step 4, just to stitching the handle together. So let me show you what the next part of step 4 is. So pin ends of handles to right side of bag at handle placements with seams on handles towards center. Stitch across ends of handles a 1/2 inch from top edge to keep in place. To be careful not to twist handles. See illustration. Okay, so you're going to take your bag, and we have our little clips that we made. And you'll do this on the other side when you have the other one stitched too. And you're going to place the handle in between those 2 clips, making sure not to twist. And you're just going to pin it on there. And then you're going to come back over to the machine. And you just want to stitch on the edge of it. You don't need to stitch a 5/8 of an inch seam yet. So just to have it, so it's on there. Okay, and make sure you back stitch. And lift your needle up, clip. And then you're going to do the other side. And you're stopping when you take the pin out. And then back stitching. And lifting your needle up, clipping. And then you're going to repeat that process for the other side for the handle. So now we have our bag close to being finished with our handle on and our side seam stitched and our bottom part stitched. So that's the end of step 4.